How's everyone doing today? Here to talk a bit about Unqork and integrations. My name is Aneesh Devi, and with me is Ed Keenan from Brookfield. He's the VP of Investor Applications there, and I'm from Chenoa, and we're excited to be here to talk a bit more about how Unqork makes integrations a lot easier, some of the architecture patterns, and have a discussion at the end as well, too. Just a little bit about Chenoa. We're one of the leading partners with Unqork at this point. We've got experience building over 60 applications at this point, and I head up our Unqork practice. And Ed's been a great partner with us at Brookfield, and we've been able to do a lot of work there, and they have a great vision for how Unqork is going to be a big part of their roadmap moving forward. So just quickly, why today we want to talk a bit more about why integrations are hard, what Unqork's value proposition is, and how the features they have make it easier. Talk a bit more about the integration patterns and architectures that we see and that we utilize. And lastly, talk a bit more about Brookfield and the work that we've been doing there, the integrations patterns there, and what the roadmap for them looks like as well. We at Chenoa are very much a technically focused firm, so for us, integrations and the architecture patterns are very important, and we want to share some of the thoughts and insights that we've seen over our experience building with Unqork. So right now, data integrations are hard. It takes a lot of time. I'm sure there's a lot of your companies have entire organizations devoted to integrations, how they're going to operate, and the coordination is extremely onerous for all involved. You have data silos, the reusability is lacking, you risk the multiple systems of records. A lot of the transformations lead to spaghetti code and mix of business logic where you don't have true access to the data or in the format you want. And lastly, security and DevOps. How do you keep your API secure? How do you keep them performant? The whole management of that layer is becoming increasingly difficult with the more number of third-party systems, the more databases involved. So as your enterprise footprint keeps growing, the coordination and the overall strategy continues to evolve too quickly to keep up from a engineering perspective. So with Unqork, what we've been really observing is that the speed at which you can build the integrations is obviously a huge part of it using the codeless approach. But really the ability to pull data in sort of a standardized format, regardless of the vehicle or the method, is truly one of the biggest advantages, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later. And just because you're using Unqork doesn't mean that you're creating another data silo, which is a really important piece for us. One of the big issues with third-party systems generally is I don't want another system of record or another place that I have to take care of looking at where the data is stored, and we'll talk more about how Unqork makes it easy to get data back into the right systems. The data transformation elements and tools that are already built in are very quick, and we'll get into more of the reusability component as well. And I think one of the big things is because it makes it easier the integration part is much easier. The amount of data that you can bring into your applications helps with helping the applications themselves be a lot more robust, allowing for faster decisions for your users and getting that true maximizing of benefit for the transformation application that you're building. And lastly, and can't say this enough, there's already inbuilt security, and we'll show some of the features here in a second, but things like mass key storage, there's field level access on APIs as well. That certainly changes the way that you think about it, not having to worry so much about every single endpoint all the time. It's very customizable and friendly to stand up new integrations. There's two main components to how you build an integration inside of Unqork. You stand up a service inside of your environment. This is really how you connect to the data source, and we'll show you some of the fields there. But the beauty here is you set it up once and you can access it from anywhere within the application repeatedly. using a plugin, which is the second piece. And think of the plugin as an adapter that is customized for that specific use within the application. That has been the ability to reuse a service in multiple different fashions using different plugins is this a paradigm of many plugins to one service, which makes the reusability very high for any data source coming in. So no longer do you have to build purpose-built APIs every single time you have a new application. You can really figure out how to bring the data into the Unqork environment once, and then use plugins to transform and make that the data response the exact piece of what you're looking for in that application. So for a service, it's really simple. You're going to set up the protocol and the host. You're going to set the authentication. Again, this goes back to security. There's a lot of different security options, but two of the main ones are OAuth and a bearer token. And then there's some additional parameters, which are actually very powerful from a security perspective. Do not follow redirect from a security perspective. If you have a SOAP architecture enabling SOAP, and lastly, mutual TLS if you have a private link connection, and we'll discuss that in a little bit as well. And then just as you would want the power to inject your own headers, body, and response, the ability to add this for various use cases is very powerful and gives you the flexibility. But you have to, again, do it once at the service level, and then the rest of it is taken care of by the application builders where they don't need to worry about this moving forward. Now, if you think of on the last part on the service side is server-side execution, again, a security concern. If you don't want this exposed to the public internet, it will run only on the Unqork hosted environment, which gives you the control that you're looking for, and logging and alerting with PagerDuty, and logging into the Unqork UDLC tool, which then allows you to go back and review the logs as necessary. So again, this is the same paradigms of normal engineering, normal way of building integrations, but as you can see, we went through about 10 fields, and honestly, that is how easy it is to set up an integration. This is across all different types. This can support FTPs, APIs, internal and external, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. So now on the plugin side, this is where the application is going to make a call to the service, and this is where you're able to set what data values are coming in, and again, how you can specify the payload as well, and add query parameters to the service call. This is, again, the same concepts that you have in traditional engineering, but this is in a codeless capacity. You're not giving up any of that control or the flexibility that you'd want. It's simply just point and click and inserting in a modal here. And you select the request style, everything's REST compliant, and here is where you can map the fields within the application to the service, and that's literally it. You'd have a service running from, as long as you have your authentication credentials, you can have a service and an API running inside of an application in about 10 minutes. This is one of the reasons why data integrations more broadly has become a very focal point for how we build Unqork applications, because it makes bringing data into your Unqork application very simple and straightforward, and allows for that. You're not thinking too hard about what that overhead might look like, because, as we all know, if you have to think about that for every application, it can be quite a bit of overhead to figure out how to get the data you need where, coordinate with the right teams, but this is a bit more streamlined and the ability to just set it once and be done with it. Taking a step back, we're talking a lot about integrations, but why are the integrations important inside of Unqork? And one of we think about building applications in three main buckets for Unqork. Unqork as the front end, Unqork as a full stack application, and Unqork as just the back end. And the Unqork as a backend is really because there's all these anything that you build inside of Unqork generates an API. And that is a way that you could build sort of a headless application if you're interested in it. Unqork as a full stack, because there's a database layer built in. If you wanted to have Unqork be the system of record or the master data set for an application, very, very straightforward as well. But the biggest power and by far the most popular approach is Unqork as the front end, where you're using all of the functionality of Unqork to bring data in from various data sources and being able to orchestrate it within the application layer. And you apply the business logic, enable the right security, and enable the users, whether it's operations, whether it's customer facing, the ability to access that data and make decisions on it quickly. That is where the power of the flexibility of integrations with Unqork, the speed of it, allows us to bring data in very quickly and create that single pane experience. You have maybe 5 different data sources today. Think of a Unqork application that's connecting those 5 and presenting it in a more streamlined experience for any user. That is the real power and what we've seen repeatedly as one of the most preferred approaches to building. The other 2 are great. They're fantastic from a speed perspective, but the true business value is really in the first one, where Unqork is the front end. Now, if you dive a little deeper, there's 3 main sort of ways that we think about integrations. You have APIs, you have webhooks, and lastly, file transfer. APIs, I think, self-explanatory, but what is unique here is that it actually supports private APIs, so any proprietary APIs that have been built by your teams already, sitting in a cloud environment, whether it's a Lambda function or sitting on a host, can be accessed, and I'll show an architecture diagram in a little bit. But you have all of the standard API approaches that you can take, multi-part. The security is already built in. If you wanted to mimic polling, there's the ability to mimic polling if you need it. So all the integration patterns that you think about from a architecture perspective are supported. It's simplified and makes it easy for the builder to access it. Webhooks are less often used, but have their value for event-driven or transaction or trigger-based actions that need to be taken. You could mimic a pub-sub pattern if you wanted to with webhooks. The most common use case that we see is a lot with SendGrid or any email or Slack type integration where you want to trigger an action based off of a message that's been received. That's a very basic application, but you could build your own webhook to really listen for triggers from another application, from an existing message queue. You can really fit it into your general architecture at your company right now as well. And lastly, file transfer. I think this is still necessary in today's world. We still have plenty of legacy systems that don't have APIs, and file transfers make it an easy way to synchronize data back and forth. But this is also great for batch processing, nightly jobs. We all have some application or another use case for SFTP still, and they'll still be around for quite some time. I mentioned this a couple times. I wanted to call this out because I think this is an area that has a tremendous amount of value. We all have a polyglot approach to how we build. There's some things that are going to be built in, let's say, Java. There's some things that are built in Unqork. You want all these systems to talk to each other. And as the push towards moving all workloads to the cloud continues, a lot of those APIs or services are going to be hosted on the cloud. For both Azure and AWS, there is the ability to create a private link between your company's VPC and Unqork's cloud so that you have a non-internet facing connection. And I think from a security perspective and also from a performance perspective, that is, if you're co-located, especially with the same region, you have a tremendous amount of opportunity to really build an Unqork application that is utilizing all of your existing services, and it doesn't really feel like it's a third-party cloud solution. It really feels like it's part of your existing architecture as it is. This is extremely simple to set up. We showed you on the service side how you enable the MTLS option, and there's one request that goes to the Unqork support team, and you're up and running. So this, to us, has been a game changer. We have multiple customers already using this because it is allowing them to take on their proprietary APIs, custom-built APIs, such as calculators or raters that they've built in-house and provide secure access to the Unqork application to either get a response from or to share data back for storing it in whatever system of record there might exist today. And getting data out of Unqork is also very easy, which is one of the reasons why we don't treat it as a black box or another system that you need to worry about in your architecture. And that is a big advantage. There's a lot of concern around, vendor lock-in or platform lock-in. The ability to get your data out of Unqork, whether it's for BI purposes, whether it's to push to a system of record, is very simple. And this could be done via a more synchronous process where write calls are being made by the config, or it could be using a BI connector from Mongo. And what's going to be coming out soon is more around Snowflake as well, which is obviously growing in popularity. So they're going to continue to build these pre-built connectors that are going to make life easier for all of us. And lastly, for more from a DevOps perspective, all of the logs inside of Unqork can be accessed via API. It's very simple to write a small API config inside of Unqork that is going to push your logs to your general APM, which will help you consolidate your overall architecture service logs so you can monitor your applications or your stack in a more total approach, and you don't just have to think about Unqork as a standalone application on its own. So I think all this together makes the building with Unqork less of a it's a system over there that we need to worry about. This helps it really fold into your architecture that's already existing in a few different ways and be able to drive the value of the codeless architecture to help your transformation initiatives, which is what we've seen and what we've experienced with Brookfield as well. And that is, we've had a great time working with Ed and his team, doing a lot of integrations with them, and again, building out that front end to help optimize a bunch of different areas in the investor world. Ed, do you want to talk a little bit more about the sort of how we've been able to unlock more power with integrations?
Yeah, thanks, Anish. So Ed Keenan, Brookfield Asset Management. I spend my time in basically mostly investor-facing technology, which is what Anish and his team have been so helpful with in the past 6 months or so. We are currently on an initiative to digitize our client onboarding experience for private funds investors. So Brookfield, if you're not aware, very large player in the private asset space, alternative investment management, basically of all different asset classes. We are looking to vastly speed up the process to get basically either accredited investors or institutional investors onboarded to our funds. And that process today is extremely onerous. It's very manual. Really, the industry standard is still to send PDFs, work with legal teams to get those filled out, fund administrators, all sorts of third parties that need to sort of play a role in that process. And it can take weeks. In some cases, it can take months. And really, the inefficiencies are driven out of the fact that none of that data is retained anywhere. I'll fill out a subscription document for a real estate fund, and then I'll have to redo the entire thing for an infrastructure fund where that data really could have been reused. So we're working with Unqork, with Chenoa, and with some other partners to develop a digital solution for this. So basically taking that subscription document, digitizing it on an Unqork front end, and integrating it with our back-end systems such that all of the investor data can be retained safely. To Anish's earlier point on built-in security, that was really one of the reasons we went with Unqork. And from a data retention perspective, we can sort of speed up the amount of time it takes to get investors onboarded to our funds by what we've calculated to be somewhere between 5 and 10x, depending on the fund. So it's a tremendous value add for the organization. It's a real sort of step in the right direction, we think, in terms of digitizing our full investor experience. And it's highly scalable. So every time we add a new fund, the back-end systems largely remain the same. We can spend a couple days, a couple weeks, if necessary, if it's a complicated one, to build out the new subscription document in the front end in Unqork. Those integrations that we have using partners in the middleware space, sometimes direct API calls, and sometimes file transfers. really all the systems of record remain the same. So it's a very, very nimble process. It's very quick to market, and we're really looking forward to going live at the start of the new year.
Thanks, Ed. And a lot of Brookfield's technology has evolved over time, so there are a lot of still legacy systems. A lot of it's still internal. Could you talk a little bit more about how we've been able to build and utilize internal systems to still build APIs and integrations to get this digital layer, as you talked about, up and running?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was sort of one of the biggest challenges that we identified going in, especially with some of our sort of really legacy systems that were built at a time when APIs were not necessarily a commonplace feature. That has required us to really be sort of leverage a lot of the interoperable integration technology that Unqork has, and sometimes leverage third parties as well. So we work with Workato as a middleware layer in many cases, and they've been very helpful in their partnership with Unqork. On the internal side, not necessarily the investor-facing applications, we've worked with our financial operations teams to develop workflows around fundraising, investor committee letters and approvals and things of that nature, and that's required us to integrate with a lot of legacy systems, portfolio monitoring, for example, finance, corporate treasury systems, and things of that nature. And we've been able to do that in a variety of ways, whether using API connections in the case of one of our products for portfolio monitoring, and then in other cases, file transfers in the instance that an API is not available. The thing that we love about it is that it's extremely scalable, so you can do things sort of piecemeal. You can say, I'm going to use Unqork as the system of record for some of this data on a temporary basis while we either build an API or come up with a more sustainable solution. But it really does allow you to do that sort of piece by piece. And
as Brookfield's technology continues to evolve, there's a lot more around third-party services or other cloud providers that are going to continue to be added. We've talked about how Quantum is a third-party service right now, but you've got internal data that is going to continue to be calculated and be understood because of the internal systems. But as they migrate to cloud services, how do you see Unqork's role in, and how much lift and shift effort, if any, do you as the systems change over time?
Yeah, that's another sort of key differentiator that we identified with Unqork early on. So in terms of sort of the stages of this development, we recognize the limitations that we have today with systems like Quantum, certain other sort of fund administrative products, certain portfolio monitoring products that really require us to do a lot of work at the outset to build back-end tables and whatnot in Unqork to make this all work. As we grow and look towards more sort of modern cloud-based technology, that process becomes a whole lot easier because there isn't a tremendous amount of lift and shift that needs to be done. Unqork is obviously pre-configured for API connections. As Aneesh was saying, everything that you build in Unqork generates an API, and that allows us to look for sort of more forward-looking products going forward. We're expanding a lot into the cloud. We're outsourcing a lot more of our data. And Unqork is the perfect way to do that in a sustainable and nimble and quick way to deliver.
And I know there's a long roadmap for Unqork and Brookfield. Is there a specific feature or integration that you're most looking forward to that for us to get our hands on that's going to be a pretty big game changer for Brookfield?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to sort of the investor-facing space. We're starting with these subscription documents, but that's just a tiny piece in the investor-facing portfolio. We eventually want to scale that to cover really all of our investor-facing technology, whether that be the full onboarding suite from AML, KYC, tax, disclosures, things of that nature, side letters, and eventually a client portal, because the one we have today is a very legacy product. It doesn't really evolve with changes in technology, and we see Unqork as being the best way for us to deliver a consistent, unified front end for all investor experiences at Brookfield. So from a scalability perspective, that's definitely what we're looking forward to most. In order to achieve that, we're going to need to have a lot of complex integrations. Salesforce remains our client system of record. That one is quite easy to integrate with. Unqork has a tremendous API connection capability to Salesforce. But going back to the process of staging this, today we're required to integrate with that legacy client portal. And the goal would be over the next 24 months or so to start slowly phasing out pieces of that portal, moving it over to Unqork in a way that many of our other peers, especially in the traditional asset management space, have done.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you, everybody. I want to open it up for any Q&A, and thanks for joining. And thank you, Ed. Appreciate being here.
Thank you.
If anyone have any question, I have the mic here. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So Ed and Aneesh, I think one thing you talked about is the business and everything that's changing. Obviously, we're in a difficult economic, state at the moment and everything else. So Ed, for your teams to scale them, like how does it help working with partners like Chenoa, having different, people you can come in with different skill sets like Unqork, like everything else to augment? Like how does Brookfield think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Before getting to Brookfield, came out of almost 10 years working in consulting, worked very closely with Unqork while I was there, and I've seen quite a few different ways to build out a competent Unqork development team. What we've done here at Brookfield is, I think, really exciting and really sort of creative in engaging sort of multiple partners that each play different roles, to Paul's point. Chenoa have been a tremendous partner for us in terms of development. The competency of their developers and architects is top notch. We can do sort of a hybrid onshore-offshore model to speed up the development, get it's almost like getting 2 sprints in one because you're getting sort of 24-hour coverage. And then we've engaged with other partners in the delivery space in terms of project management and things like that. Building a small in-house team of configurators. I have a colleague, Morgan, in the back there, who's one of our stars in the Unqork space, and we're quickly trying to scale that capability as well. But Unqork is unquestionably more cost-effective than trying to do things the old-fashioned way and build something from scratch using code. So in a difficult market condition like this one, Unqork really is the perfect partner because you have so much flexibility in how you deliver.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.